is Our Voices, and I am Sembenyi Shekoye, joined by my colleagues Orion and Amina. Hello, ladies. How was your week? Hello. And by the way, did any one of you go shopping?
Hi, Lily. How are you? I definitely did. I'm always shopping for some reason, maybe because I have 3 kids, but I've been pleasantly happy that the gas prices are going down, but other things aren't for some reason, and I hope that changes.
Honestly, I'm with Orion. I was really happy last week when I put gas in my car and the price was almost resembling what it used to look like. But then I spoke to my father in Nigeria and I asked him, so how are things? And he was like, we're just being patient.
Actually, every time I go shopping, I'm always shocked. Take sanitary pad, for example. I was just reading, just in 1 year, the price increased by 10.8%. How crazy is that?
That's a lot. And for something that you need every month, it's an essential. I mean, I wonder if toilet paper's prices went up because it's just as important, if not...
I would argue that it is more important.
More important?
Definitely.
I agree.
Rising cost of food and essential commodities, including rent, groceries and gasoline, have hit almost everyone around the world. But according to World Economic Forum, current cost of living crisis is impacting women more severely than men. Already existing financial insecurity, coupled with gender imbalance in household responsibility, are some of the factors why women could feel the impact of inflation even more than men. On this week's episode, we discuss the causes of inflation and how countries in Africa are especially struggling to keep up with rising prices. We will hear experts' analysis on how women are impacted more and hear directly from women in the continent for some tips on living within their means.
The inflation hitting the global markets has sent its shockwaves to many African countries. Currently, dollar exchange rates in Kenya are at an all-time high, exchanging at 120 shillings to a dollar. Middle-class Kenyans and those living roughly on $1 a day have felt the pinch on fuel pumps and prices, like foodstuff in shops and vegetable markets. Some have resolved to running small enterprises, like selling cooked foods to earn an extra shilling apart from their main jobs. Our colleague Amina Chombo talked to some female small business owners in Mombasa, Kenya.
Monisha Kwania, a community activist and business lady in South Coast Kenya, runs a books and sportswear shop in Kwale. The youthful mother of 2 school-going kids says coping with the current situation has not been easy. Her business is not doing well.
For me, I'm depending on this business to keep my kids in school, to have my daily basis and all that, my daily needs. And if the prices have risen, that means the customers are not enough. You don't get enough, you don't sell enough. So it's really hard. We are struggling to pay school fees. I'm struggling to have my basic needs going on, paying for my electricity, buying my food items and all that. So it's really, really hard for us right now.
She had to venture into other enterprises to get an extra shilling. She decided to grow vegetable on her kitchen garden and also keeps poultry for consumption and sometimes sells to her neighbors.
To be sincere, I have to look for more other side hustles so that I can cope with my own living situations. And when you come at my home, I have decided to have a small kitchen garden just to make sure I get veggies. I don't have to go to the market to get the veggies. I have to stock or do poultry just because we cannot buy meat at the butchery. 1 kg of meat nowadays is 500 plus, and it's really hard.
As Monisha puts it, this bookshop is not enough to take care of her needs. She has another small enterprise. Let's visit.
This is Kikwetu Grocery, a wholesale and retail vegetable shop that serves more than 100 homes in Kombani village. Monisha gets her produce from the main vegetable market in Mombasa. Cornflour prices, a staple food for most Kenyans, has doubled while cooking oil is high. The Kenya government subsidy program was stopped after the general elections. Abigail Ndizi, a single mother of 2, says she can no longer prepare a balanced meal for her kids due to high food prices.
Being a single mother, you need to balance everything. So sometimes you go with just 1 meal a day so that you get to save the unga for the next day. So how we used to eat from morning, lunchtime, and evening. Right now, we only have to take breakfast and dinner. Now that all my kids are at school, they depend food from school to eat. So I've also lose weight because everything has gone high.
In as much as food and fuel prices are high, there is hope among Kenyan women that the incoming President William Ruto's government will cushion citizens. Amina Chombo, VOA, Mombasa.
What do you think about what we heard from these women?
Yeah.
You know, she mentioned the cooking oil has gone up, and I was just thinking, if this continues through Ramadan, a lot of Muslims are not going to have anything to eat because everything we eat is fried.
Yes, I agree with that jollof rice. But I think that what she's saying about, you know, having another business, imagine she was prosperous and she was getting somewhere, and now her economic empowerment is in jeopardy. So it's pretty sad.
These are all important information that will help us understand what we are talking about, inflation. But today we are specifically looking at how it's impacting women. So we invited an expert, Riya Rusofobovic, Ethiopia Country Director for Action Against Hunger, to discuss how women in Africa are especially impacted by rising cost of living as well as food insecurity. Riya is joining us by Skype from Ethiopia. Riya, tell us, African countries are not only impacted by the rising cost of living, but also by food insecurity. How is the combination of these two impacting women?
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. So globally, we know that level of hungers remain alarmingly high. And in 2021, they basically surpassed all the previous records. And in 22, we're expecting them to deteriorate even further. And women are disproportionately affected by hunger in many countries. We know that nearly in 2 out of 3 world countries, women are more likely than men to suffer from hunger and food insecurity. So in the face of climate shocks in Africa, we are seeing the increased competition for resources such as wood and water. And this often translates into women walking long distances in search of water and wood, which exposes them to higher risk of violence and impacts their ability to do any other chores that are awaiting for them at home, such as childcare, cleaning, cooking, looking after sick and elders, attending to their farms, and etc. So women and girls, typically what we are seeing, are paying a much higher price in any crisis. And this is due to traditional roles and the gender inequality that already exists, but it only gets worse in the crisis. Studies have shown that women unduly suffer the impact of disasters and severe weather events and climate changes because of the cultural norms and an equitable distribution of roles, resources, and power. So we also, on the ground, we see the increase in harmful traditional practices, such as early marriages, sometimes without this, but also to reduce the burden on the family. And this puts a lot of young women at risk. At risk of abuse and neglect and underdevelopment. In crisis, these girls get much younger in age, which increases their chances for malnutrition. There's also a lot of evidence of increased domestic violence at home, which we already seen in COVID, but this time it's linked to reduced livelihood opportunities for men, and increase.
And that you're very much right, and you touched on a little bit about how exactly it is impacting women in terms of hunger. We know that women always give more of themselves financially, food-wise, and so forth. And is there any studies or is there any assessment that has been done on how much women are malnourished in terms of during this particular season? And hopefully that research or that data can help us to probably advocate for women's nutrition needs.
Yeah, so we do have a data that in East and Horn of Africa currently, due to drought, we have 36 million people that are food insecure. And about 3/3 of them are women and children. Definitely. So, and we also know that at least 20 million people are already walking each day to high levels of acute food insecurity and rising malnutrition across East Africa, and I would say particularly in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, that are facing unprecedented droughts.
So, Riya, the question that I have for you is, we saw that in Mombasa, a woman made reference to gardening. So she's decided to do subsistence gardening to kind of lessen the cost of her upkeep, I would say. Have you seen any other strategies that women are using to cope up with the inflation?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing strategies with the women that we are serving as the Action Against Hunger, the most marginalized women. We do see them coping. We see them coping long distances and seeking assistance.
Yes,
we see them in search for food and water. We see them taking their children away from the conflict and drought as well. We also, agencies such as Action Against Hunger and some of our other partners are also recognizing that emergencies don't affect everyone in the same way, and that women, particularly adolescent women and girls, are typically at a higher risk. And we are focusing on designing programming with kind of that in mind as well. At the current time, I would say we're really focusing on life-saving assistance. But the longer-term approaches are also necessary to address the humanitarian impacts of the food.
Maybe along what you are saying, is there anything that can be done, maybe in terms of policy by governments or international community to address this challenge of women specifically?
I mean, there is a lot of things. I think it depends on the country where you are in Africa, but what we're seeing the women often are actually restricted from owning the land, which is a big impediment for them to get the loan without any kind of titles, to be able to recover their businesses after droughts. There's a lot of things. And I think, traditional gender norms are, as I said, that already exist, are kind of exaggerated in these crises. There's also, the governments could be investing into the safety net social programs that are usually reaching the millions of the people in the rural areas and could really help and save some of this population in the crisis like this one.
Thank you so much. That was Riya Begovic, Ethiopia Country Director for Action Against Hunger. Thank you so much for joining us from Ethiopia to discuss how women in Africa are disproportionately affected by inflation and food insecurity. It's now time for a quick break. But before we go, please visit us on our social media platforms and share with us how you are personally affected by the rising prices of food and commodities. In the next few weeks, we are planning to bring a conversation of fintech industry, a startup dynamics in Africa, and inviting an investor to join us. Please share with us what you want to know about this industry and if there is any question you want to ask the investor. We are on Facebook at VOAAfrica, and our Instagram and Twitter is at VOA Our Voices. We are also on WhatsApp, and our number is country code +1 202 503 9025. We'll be right back.
Empowerment and humanity towards a better world.
Facts and information from key players rather than spectators in politics, business, science and technology.
City, rural, educated, or underprivileged. We care and we listen to what matters to you.
Your voices are our voices.
Welcome back. You are watching Our Voices. Today we are discussing inflation and how it's affecting women in particular. From airlines in Nigeria to shoppers in Malawi, Africans are feeling the impact of the Ukraine crisis in ranging increases in the price of fuel, grain and fertilizer. This next report will give us a deeper look on how inflation is affecting commodities in Africa.
From Malawi to the Maghreb, Africans are feeling the impact of the Ukraine crisis in ranging fuel and food price increases. Global oil prices have reached a decade high since Russia invaded on February 24. In Africa, they have doubled. Nigeria subsidizes petrol, but this bakery manager still pays more to bake bread.
Cost of production, it has increased immensely. So they have to come together and also increase the price of bread by 40% to what it was before.
Meanwhile, diesel and jet fuel prices are sold at market rates. Samuel Salau, a construction engineer, says the price of diesel has doubled from 310 naira or $75.
Within a month, it left that level to about 600 and something plus now. And so many industry is on diesel. Trucks that bring in food stuff from the north to the south are running on diesel. Even train runs on diesel.
In Malawi, bread is much more expensive at the supermarket in the capital, Lilongwe.
It is more difficult to buy bread because the price has gone up exponentially compared to before. The amount we paid for 2 loaves of bread is now enough only for 1. We are spending more.
Both Ukraine and Russia are major suppliers of wheat and other cereals to Africa, while Russia is a key producer of fertilizer. The war and international sanctions against Moscow have disrupted supply chains, up to places like Bukavu in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo.
We hardly produce anything, and everything that is produced does not reach the market because of the state of the roads. We are totally dependent on international supplies, and the prices are going up because of the war in Ukraine, and this is reflected here in Bukavu.
This dependence has drawn concern from the UN.
We must do everything possible to avert a hurricane of hunger and the meltdown of the global food system.
The war has raised fears of even further increases in North Africa. Amid wholesale flour shortages, this bakery in Tunis has to buy consumer packets.
I am buying 10 kilograms at 18 dinars when normally I would buy a 50 kilogram bag at 26 dinars. All of this before even feeling the impact of the war. How will we work afterwards? I'm worried.
Thousands of civilians have been killed inside Ukraine. More than 3 million people have fled across its borders, and 2 million more are displaced inside the country. The figures are rising fast. As the conflict continues, so will its impact further abroad in Africa.
These are really difficult times for many countries around the continent. And if you really take a closer look to Horn of Africa, for example, the greater part of the region, southern Ethiopia to northern Kenya, Somalia, is experiencing the worst drought in 4 decades.
Sure.
And this is an area already affected by conflict, right? And now they are going through high inflation that's caused by the rising, first climate change, then COVID, and now the war between Russia and Ukraine. And take Somalia, for example. The country used to export 90% of wheat from Russia and Ukraine. Now, without that, and also no rain to produce their own food, the prices are going up, and the gas prices are going up. And so millions of people, especially women and children, are suffering from lack of food and also are relying only on aid.
You know, the first time I had like an epiphany about how much of a global village the world has become was one time I went back home and I called the hair lady to come make my hair. You know how it is like back home. And I was sitting down and she looked at the volume of my hair and she was like, okay, so this is going to be 800 naira. And I said to her, this used to be 500, like what happened in the 1 year that I've been gone? And she said to me, oh, the dollar has gone up. And my face was, have you ever seen a dollar? I didn't say that, but in my mind I was thinking, has this lady ever seen a dollar? How does the dollar inflation rate, how exactly does this affect you? So I didn't say anything, I was just smiling. And after she left, I was talking to my cousins. And I was like, why is she using the dollar as an excuse to increase the price of why she's braiding? How does her labor affect braiding my hair? And they put it in context for me. And they said to me, think about the taxi that she had to get in and the fuel prices that have gone up. And she has to use this money to go back home to buy food for her children. And you go and because transportation has gone up, you're bringing in tomatoes, you're bringing in onions, you know, like she has to increase her labor as well because she has to help her family.
Correct.
And then wheat. Everybody is talking about wheat. Everybody is talking about how the price of wheat has gone up.
Right.
And we don't really realize how dependent we are on each other.
Right.
You find someone in the rural area thinking, well, Russia-Ukraine war doesn't affect me, but it does affect you. When you look around you and how inconvenient your day-to-day life has gotten, you realize how much it has affected you.
Yeah, I agree with the wheat situation that you just mentioned. I mean, because things do trickle down at some point when the inflation is globally. It does trickle down to the lady in Nigeria. But I want to differ from always blaming Russia and Ukraine situation on the global, maybe even African situation, because you see Macky Sall, president of Senegal, who's also the chairman of the African Union, going to Russia to broker a deal for wheat when we have fertile land, when we have sun, when we have beautiful landscape in Africa. Africans are asking, what is it that we need to be able to be self-sustainable, to be able to be self-sufficient in terms of our agriculture. So they're asking, I mean, I was following on Twitter when he actually took that trip. Some Africans really didn't take that as a positive thing. It was a development according to African Union, but it's something that teaches us, the war in Ukraine taught us that we need to be self-sufficient. We don't need to go to Europe to ask for wheat. But as people always say, African solutions for African problems.
That is a very interesting discussion. But now we have to take another break. But when we come back, we are going to meet women in the continent who are going to tell us about how they are coping up with the current inflation. That will be your voice segment. And don't go anywhere.
Empowerment and humanity towards a better world.
Facts and information from key players rather than spectators in politics, business, science and technology.
City, rural, educated, or underprivileged. We care and we listen to what matters to you.
Your voices are our voices.
Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. We hit the streets of Nairobi, Kenya to get some tips from women there on how to cope with the rising prices. Let's take a look.
Number of adjustments. For example, I'm part of the people who scrambled for the subsidized maize meal, maize flour. Yes, so that I have a stock of it in the house. And that's what I'm using right now, instead of going for the double priced one. Yes. I've also had to make sure I make lunch for my children in the morning so that they can lunch that I made in the house instead of paying for the school food in school, which is costly for me. I'm reducing on school fees.
So one of the things I personally do, I buy things in bulk. I get money instead of buying every time you run to the shop, outside shop there. You go to a wholesale shop, you buy and you see that you save a lot. So and then another thing, you can buy things and then to save on the gas, to save on the cooking energy, you boil them and you store them, so that you can do it over the weekend or when you are free. Another thing is that if you have a market, an open air market near you, for example, myself, I go to Muduru early in the morning. I make shopping for the house, and at times I buy things extra. I come and sell to others, so I make an extra coin. Yes.
You know, most domestic obligations fall on the shoulder of women in most cases, like doing groceries, from what we have heard from these women, taking care of children. I think that's why they feel the rise of inflation even more than men.
Right, and I think that especially business owners, I was hosting a show about a baker in Burundi who just felt like things are going so high that she's going to maybe just close her business down. But I was trying to give her an alternative, asking her, is it only wheat that you need to bake your breads? Can you use potato flour? And she said, whoa, I never thought about it. I never thought that I could use potato flour or yam flour to make bread. And so I think sometimes innovation comes in the toughest times, and we can just hope that this tough time would teach us new things, new ways.
Definitely. And whenever there's some kind of economic crisis that resembles this, someone comes out on top. This time round, I really do hope that Africans will be the ones to come out on top.
Oh, yeah, it's very important to emphasize on creativity, and many African countries are already trying. And that brings us to the end of our show today. We will see you again next week with another exciting topic, but don't forget to continue the conversation on our social media platforms. Until then, we wish you a good day.